By 8 a.m. on November 8, 2018, the town of Paradise, California, was already gone. Not on fire, not threatened, gone.
911, your emergency.
I'm in a dozer. All the windows got blown out. I got my curtains down. I can't last too long here.
Okay, if you can get out safely, get out, okay?
I can't.
In less than 2 hours, a wall of flame had consumed an entire town of 27,000 people. 85 of them never made it out. And the thing that destroyed them wasn't some unpredictable act of nature that nobody could have seen coming. It was a broken metal hook on a power line that had been deteriorating for years, owned by a company that had already been linked to 17 major wildfires the year before. This is how a California town called Paradise was erased from the map in a single morning. To understand what happened, you need to understand what Paradise actually was. It wasn't a city. It wasn't even really a town in the way most people think of towns. It was a quiet community tucked into the Sierra Nevada foothills, about 90 miles north of Sacramento. Pine trees lining every street, a Black Bear diner that locals had been going to for years, a covered wooden bridge that had survived since 1877. The kind of place where people moved when they wanted to slow down, when they were done with the noise and the rush of city life, and just wanted somewhere peaceful to grow old. And that last part matters more than almost anything else in this story. Because Paradise wasn't just a retirement-friendly town. The average age of its residents was among the highest in California. Thousands of elderly people, many of them living alone. Many without cars, many with mobility issues, some on oxygen, some in wheelchairs. Remember that. We're coming back to it. Now let's talk about the conditions that turned this peaceful place into a tinderbox. California had been locked in an extraordinary drought since the year 2000. By November 2018, the Paradise area had gone more than 200 consecutive days without meaningful rainfall. Over 100 million trees across the state had been killed by a combination of that drought and an explosion in bark beetle populations, insects that prey on weakened trees and had been spreading further uphill each year as winters got warmer. Those dead trees were still standing all over the hillsides around Paradise, dry, brittle, packed together. And even the live vegetation had lost so much moisture that it was sitting below critical fire hazard levels. Then add the Jarbo winds. Locals knew them well. Every night, cold air from the Sierra Nevada would funnel down through the canyons and out into the foothills. Katabatic winds, forecasters call them, regularly gusting past 35, sometimes 50 miles per hour. They were relentless, and they were predictable. And on the night of November 7th, into the early morning of November 8th, they were howling. The atmosphere around Paradise was not waiting for a spark. It was begging for one. The spark came at approximately 6:15 in the morning. On a transmission tower near the tiny community of Pulga, in the bottom of the Feather River Canyon, a small metal hook snapped. It sounds almost trivial. A hook. The kind of thing you'd find holding a picture frame to a wall. But this hook was part of the suspension system for a high-voltage transmission line. It had been wearing out for years. The infrastructure it was part of was nearly 100 years old. The last time the California Public Utilities Commission had inspected that specific section of line was more than 6 years earlier. When the hook snapped, the line dropped. Electricity arced. Molten metal dripped down onto the dry ground below, and the ground ignited. At the Cal Fire Station in Jarbo Gap, the captain on duty was up early, making breakfast for his crew. He started to hear what he thought was rain hitting the roof of the station. He went to look outside, and the wind ripped the door right out of his hand. It wasn't rain. It was pine needles. Thousands of pine needles, torn from the surrounding trees and hurled through the air at 35 miles per hour, pelting the side of the building like buckshot. He went back inside. Then his radio crackled. Possible fire in the canyon. By 6:45 a.m., the first firefighter to reach the scene found a fire that was already well established and burning in terrain that was completely inaccessible. Sustained winds at 35 miles per hour. He immediately declared the potential for a major incident. That was the last moment anyone had any realistic chance of controlling what was about to happen. Within the first hour, the fire had already torn through Pulga and the small mountain hamlet of Concau. But it wasn't spreading the way most fires spread, advancing slowly from a single front that you can track and get ahead of. This fire was doing something far more dangerous. It was throwing embers. Softball-sized chunks of burning debris, caught by the Jarbo winds and hurled miles ahead of the actual fire front, landing on rooftops, in gutters, in dry grass in backyards. Within 40 minutes of ignition, there were at least 30 separate spot fires burning inside the boundaries of Paradise. Fires that had started not because the main front had reached them, but because embers had rained down from the sky. At its peak, the campfire was consuming 80 football fields of land every single minute. The people of Paradise didn't have a fire approaching their town. They woke up inside one. And there were only 4 roads out. The evacuation order was issued in stages, not all at once, in zones, starting around 7:30 and 8 in the morning. By then, embers had already been falling on Paradise for nearly an hour. At 7:41 a.m., the first home in Paradise was officially reported on fire. By 7:45, emergency dispatchers were being flooded with calls. People calling to report that their house was burning. People calling to ask what they should do. People calling because they had no car, no neighbor nearby, no way to leave on their own. Dispatchers told some of them to get out on their own because there weren't enough rescue workers to come to them. Now remember what I told you about the average age of Paradise residents. This is where it matters. When a wildfire evacuation order goes out in a younger, more mobile community, most people can be in their cars and moving within minutes. But Paradise had thousands of elderly residents, many of them living alone, many without cars, many who woke up to smoke already visible from their windows and had nobody to call. The retirement community on the edge of town scrambled to evacuate its residents. In the chaos, 88-year-old Julian Binstock was overlooked. He was found later. Andrew Huff was in his 70s. When the fire arrived just after sunrise, his first instinct, the instinct of a man who had lived in that house for years and wasn't ready to leave it, was to try to save it. His granddaughter called him at 7:15. "You need to evacuate now," she told him. He was already outside, in his wheelchair.
Trying.
In his backyard, pointing a garden hose at the flames. There was no distress in his voice, she said afterward. Then the phone line went dead. His remains were found later in the ashes of his house. The only thing still standing was his wheelchair, sitting near the back fence next to the garden hose. Victoria Taft's daughter called her around 8:30. A neighbor had come knocking. A fire was coming. They needed to leave. Mother and daughter argued. Taft refused. If the threat was real, she said, the authorities would issue an official evacuation order. By 10 a.m., her daughter could see the morning sky going black from smoke. She couldn't reach her mother. Victoria Taft's body was found later. Her parting words with her daughter had been tense. On the roads, the situation was becoming its own disaster. Those 4 evacuation routes out of Paradise, Skyway, Pence Road, Clark Road, Pearson Road, were not built for this. A civil grand jury report from 2009 had already concluded that Paradise's roads had serious limitations as evacuation routes. Sharp curves, narrow shoulders, fire hazards right along the edges. The report estimated those roads could evacuate only about a quarter of the town's population within 2 hours. The Butte County Board of Supervisors had called that assessment not reasonable and largely dismissed it. Paradise kept growing, kept adding residents, and the roads stayed the same. Now every one of those roads was gridlocked, bumper to bumper in both directions, cars with engines overheating in stopped traffic while fire burned on both sides of the road. Some people abandoned their cars entirely and ran. Traffic jams stretched for miles. Whitney Vaughn and her husband had just enough time to grab a laundry basket of dirty clothes and a few photographs before running out of their house. As they sat stuck in traffic, she watched a man sprint past her car carrying a small baby, running as fast as he could. She told CNN afterward, "The flames were whipping and spreading so fast. It began to jump the road. There wasn't anywhere to go." Amber Toney filmed the escape she and her mother Susan Miller made through Paradise that morning. In the video, you can hear Amber's voice, shaking but trying to hold it together, saying, "It's okay, Mama. Oh God, please, please drive. Just please drive." Her mother, 59 years old, is crying, barely in control, driving through a corridor of fire on both sides. She says, "I'm trying." That video went viral within hours. Not because it was spectacular, because it looked exactly like something that could happen to your own mother. By 10:45 in the morning, the fire had grown to 20,000 acres. The main fire front was pushing through the northern outskirts of Paradise, but the destruction happening inside the town wasn't coming from the main front. It was coming from the embers, landing on roofs, in sheds, in dry grass between houses. Sheds catching fire and lighting fences, fences lighting neighboring homes, homes lighting the next home over. The fire was replicating itself faster than any firefighter could track. The incident commander on the ground assessed the situation and made a decision that tells you everything you need to know about how bad it was. Just 45 minutes after the fire entered Paradise, he ordered all firefighting efforts abandoned. Not paused, abandoned. Every resource was redirected to one mission: getting people out alive. At 6 p.m. that evening, 95% of Paradise had burned. The final death toll was 85 people. 59 of the 73 identified victims were 65 years old or older. The oldest was 99. Nearly 14,000 homes were destroyed. 153,000 acres burned over 18 days. The cost of the damage exceeded $16.5 billion, making the Camp Fire the costliest disaster in the entire world that year. Not in California, in the world. And of those 85 deaths, 70 of them occurred inside or immediately outside people's own residences. They didn't die trying to escape. They died waiting for an order that came too late, or that they couldn't act on, or that never reached them at all. Now here's the part of this story that tends to get lost in all the coverage of the fire itself. PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, the company whose broken hook started all of this, knew that line was dangerous. They had been responsible for 17 of 21 major wildfires in Northern California in the year before the Camp Fire. They had a policy that allowed them to shut off transmission lines during extreme fire weather conditions. They didn't do it for that line. The California Public Utilities Commission, which is supposed to inspect that kind of infrastructure, hadn't inspected that specific section in over 6 years. And in the immediate aftermath of the fire, a PG&E helicopter was spotted hovering over the failed transmission tower before investigators had finished documenting the scene. In January 2019, PG&E filed for bankruptcy, citing expected wildfire liabilities approaching $30 billion. The company eventually pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. They paid $13.5 billion in settlements to fire victims. The CEO at the time of the fire, received a $2.5 million severance package. The hook that snapped and started the campfire had been flagged internally by PG&E in a patrol just months earlier. Records show it had been showing signs of wear. No repair order was issued. Paradise is being rebuilt. About a third of the pre-fire population has returned. The hospital is back. Some of the schools have reopened. The water system, which was contaminated with benzene, a cancer-causing chemical, when the heat of the fire compromised the pipes, took years to fully replace. The covered bridge from 1877 is gone. The Black Bear Diner is gone. The streets that used to be lined with pines are lined with stumps and construction equipment. A survivor named Taya Rathburn Bias Cooper described that morning this way. That night, when I walked outside, I felt like I was in hell. The sky was hot, smoky, and red. The falling ash felt like the sky was falling. In 2005, 13 years before the campfire, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection released a fire management plan for the region. It warned explicitly that Paradise was at risk for an east wind-driven catastrophic fire. The warning sat in a filing cabinet. In 2009, the civil grand jury warned that the evacuation routes couldn't handle a real emergency. That warning was called unreasonable. In the years before the fire, PG&E's own records showed wear on the equipment that failed. No repairs were made. 85 people died, most of them elderly, most of them alone, most of them in their own homes. None of them had to. If you want to understand how the infrastructure failures that made the campfire possible still exist across California and what's being done about them, that video is next. And if this is the kind of storytelling you're looking for, subscribe. We cover the disasters the news spent a week on and then forgot. There are more of them than you think.